let me see. Let's wait for it to start. Come on, give me double zeros. There we go. So perfect. So today we have Susan to talk about point of view and all the nuance around point of view and how not to screw it up and how to, once you mastered it, you could twist it and change it and become really awesome writers. I want to give just one little announcement that we will have that Writing After Dark this Friday. I don't know what it's going to look like, but we're going to give it a try. So this Friday at, I think it's at 8 p.m. And there's a meeting event on our Facebook group. So feel free to join that. I don't know what it will be. I'll figure it out probably at 7:30. Whether we'll do a live video or if it'll just be chatting, who knows what it will be. But do join us and watch the train wreck that will be the Writing After Dark at 8 p.m. this Friday. And hopefully it'll be fun. You can get a little writing time in. So, Susan, feel free to take the screen and we will happily watch your talk.
About my point of view?
About your point of view, yes.
Okay, can everybody see the screen okay?
Not yet. Here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing, and then you go ahead and...
Because all I see is my PowerPoint. I'm not seeing anything else. So
yeah, feel free to go back to Skype and then try to take control of the screen again. I may have been holding it, so...
Screwed me up, did you?
I did, I'm sorry.
Hang on, folks. As we go through my lack of technological expertise. Okay, so meeting with writers, the little dot thing settings.
No, you can just go into the main window and say share screen. I think you see it. You're probably down at the bottom.
Share screen?
Yes.
Chat?
Yep.
No, I just have chat. I don't have share screen anymore.
If you close the chat, it may appear.
Nope. It's under the thing.
Yep.
Okay. Start sharing.
Perfect. You're good job. I'll go on mute and I'll monitor the chat and.
Okay, and I'm still there, I'm assuming.
Yes, you are. You're.
Okay.
Yeah. And we see your slides. Go ahead.
All right. Okay. Somebody who is a sadist asked me to write about point of view and explain it. Point of view is one of those things which, once you've got it figured out, is pretty easy. But a lot of times you see with newer writers, they slide around in point of view, or they don't realize what the nuances are of different points of view. So that's what this is about. And I hope if you have questions, you'll ask. So we'll see. Okay, point of view is literally what the primary character in your story, as chosen by the writer, sees, hears, smells, tastes, touches, feels, and above all knows. Hang on one second. Richie, go outside. My dog is barking at cars. Go on outside. Good boy. Richie's point of view is there's nothing so interesting as the cars outside the window. Okay, why worry about it? Precise point of view is part of the writer's craft, and each type of point of view has advantages and disadvantages. And as a writer, you need to choose the point of view which tells your story the best. And each one of them does some good things and does some bad things. So that's what we'll try and get at. So the point of view are first person, second person, third person omniscient, third person limited. Sometimes it's called third person closed. And I've seen articles about deep third person, but to my mind, that's pretty much just confusing the issue. It's covered by the traditional definitions. One of the things that I thought was pretty interesting is I have some young teenage boys who come and help me with my garden. And when I was putting this together, I asked them if they knew what point of view was in a book. And they said, oh yeah, we covered that in third grade. So anyways, if you haven't had it since third grade, maybe a refresher helps. And hopefully you have had it since then. First person is the big I am. It's totally told from the point of view of the character of the story. So when I saw him sauntering toward me, I warned him off with a shake of my aching head. Now, the writer or the person is the only one who knows their head is aching. His body spray still made my eyes water. So there's the physical reaction. And the sound of his nasal voice sent a chill up my spine. You would not see a chill going up someone else's spine. So that's where first person helps. I could tell by the cloudy look in his eyes that his head was aching too. So she can see this, or the character can see this cloudy look in his eyes, but she can't feel his ache. So that's why she can tell that his head was aching too. Good, I thought, so you get internal dialogue. After last night, you deserve it. So the advantages of first person. It's immediate and it's intimate. The reader aligns with the character and pretty much becomes the character. And that's one of the things you want. You get this very intense experience with a first person narrative. The reader is the primary confidant of the main character. They're actually getting inside their skin. They're seeing what they see. They're hearing what they hear. They're feeling what they feel. And it's very helpful when you want them to wonder, when you want them to try to work it out as the character works it out. And it's particularly useful in an emotionally charged story. If you have a story where the feelings and perceptions of the character are really the main deal in the story, that the action is secondary and dependent on the emotions, that's where first person really helps. And now the disadvantages, again, are the intimacy and the immediacy. Sometimes it's really hard to keep your character positive or interesting. I have a tendency when I'm writing to start off with my characters being really silent and doing a lot of internal dialogue. And then I realize they never say anything, they don't really talk to anybody, and so it can be a turnoff for the reader. So you really have to watch for that. So you got to watch out for stupidity, whining, too many negative emotions, too much reflection, too little reflection. It's a real balancing act. That's why some people are hesitant to use it. Again, it's a disadvantage because the reader only knows what the main character knows. They're walking blind with you, and they only see and feel what the main character does. So you have to be able to pull your reader along with you and not let them loose to have their own perceptions, and that can be really difficult. This is the first 2 paragraphs of one of my books, which I think is coming out in like 2 months, 3 months. And I originally wrote it in third person limited, and then I went back and redid the entire book in first person because this is a very emotionally charged story. So I let the screen door slam, hoping it would make my mother jump and perhaps hit a wrong key as she typed her story. But the rhythmic clickety-click of the typewriter never faltered. I wanted to slam the door again to get a reaction, any reaction, from my mother, but gave it up. The freedom of the beach called me. So this is like her perceptions, and you're getting the description of what's happening entirely through her point of view. The brown painted boards of the veranda were cold under my bare feet, and here and there puddles from the previous night's rain reflected little pieces of the sky. Everything was cold and wet and bleak, yet it was more inviting than the overheated summer house. Inside, with staccato talk radio murmuring behind her, my mother crouched over a new electric typewriter, cigarette burning unheated beside her, trying to make something out of herself. Now, this particular story was really difficult because the main character is immature and angry. So it was a real challenge to try to make her someone that the reader wanted to be with. And I did a lot of rewriting, and I hope I made it, but it wasn't easy. So I just wanted to point out the advantages here because, I mean, you're getting this really intense experience from the character, but as a writer, it was hard to do. And like I said, I don't know if I pulled it off. I hope I did. So the literary uses in first person, romance, it's very common. Anything with personal struggle and hardship, like memoir or even fictional stuff, exposing societal problems like Great Expectations with Dickens, where everything's told from the point of view of the main character, because otherwise you wouldn't get that same immediacy of the problems of society and how helpless the characters are. And so it helps with that. One of the things that's kind of fun is the unreliable narrator. You have the narrator giving you like, I did this, I did that, but the narrator's a liar. Agatha Christie was the first to really use this in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. It's used a lot in horror, psychological horror, like American Psycho. It's also can be used really, really well to emphasize the age or condition of the main character, like To Kill a Mockingbird. It's you get the innocence of child. Everything's told from the viewpoint of 6-year-old Scout. And Huckleberry Finn was he was sort of the natural person, which was a big deal at the time this was written. And so it gives this kind of uncivilized, natural viewpoint of society, and so therefore is able to contrast more than you would get with third person. Okay, second person. Here's an example from A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan. You look at Drew through layers of hash smoke floating in the sun. He's leaning back on the futon couch, his arm around Sasha. He's got a big, hey, come on in face and a head of dark hair, and he's built, not with weight room muscles like yours, but in a basic animal way that must come from all that swimming he does. Just don't try and say you didn't inhale, you tell him. Okay, so second person, everything is written as you. It's somewhat rare in Western literature. Until a few years ago, it was almost never used. I found quite a few books by non-American writers, like from India, and I've forgotten what other countries seem to use it quite a bit. But anyways, there are like non-Western writers use it quite a bit. And it gives a sense of personality difference in the central character. Like if the character is off, it gives that feeling. Rather than this is your normal guy you would see down the street. Rather, you get this sense of disquiet that there's something not quite right there. And it can use to be show the disaffectation of character. I realized as I wrote that, I don't know how to say it. That the character is disaffected from society, that they've moved themselves apart. So the advantages and disadvantages. The advantages are it's got some of the immediacy of the first person, so it kind of feels like the main character's chatting with you, like you're their best bud and they're saying, hey, did you know this? This is going on. And it can have a literary impact because it's less usual. It's sort of a stand up and take notice kind of thing. The disadvantages, it's got all the disadvantages with the limits of first person, and the form is often very jarring for Western readers. I've seen that some books have done mostly third person or first person, but mostly third person, and then they'll slip in, a few paragraphs or a section that's in second person. I don't know how effective that is. That's people playing with literary forms. But it's something that a few people have tried. I haven't. I don't think I would because I don't think I'd get the impact from it compared to the amount of work it would be. So anyways, there's that. Okay, now the most common is third person limited. Here's an example from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. The Dursleys hadn't even remembered that today happened to be Harry's 12th birthday. Of course, his hopes hadn't been high. They'd never given him a real present, let alone a cake, but to ignore it completely. So you're getting, it is in third person, there's a little bit of distance, but you're getting Harry's reactions. Like his hopes hadn't been high. How he felt about it. The inference, like they ignored it completely. That implies a lot of emotion, which you're seeing and hearing, but you're not in Harry's skin. Okay, so third person limited. It's similar to first person. The reader is only shown what the main character sees and senses. The reader walks beside them. They're not in their skin, but they're right there with them. It's more intimate than third person Omniscient, but maintains a bit of distance. The tone of narration is extremely important to convey mood. Like back in the previous one about his disappointment that they'd ignored his birthday. And it's more common than third person omniscient in modern literature. In traditional literature, like in the classics, a lot of them are third person omniscient, but most modern books are written in third person limited. Does anybody have any questions so far? I feel like I'm just sort of rattling on about all this. So if there is a question, please type it in, and Matthew, feel free to interrupt me.
No, we're all listening and making jokes in the chat, so no issues.
Jokes are good. If there's a good one, fill me in.
John says that he does not like second person stories because he would not do those things.
I'm with him. It's like, who are these people? I want to go away. Don't make me listen to them. Okay.
I'm not this irrational.
Okay. Okay. The advantages of third person limited is they're similar in immediacy and intimacy to first person. There is distance. That can help in portraying characters whose emotions or actions are a little dubious, but the author still wants the reader to be really aligned with them. It's like you want them to go along with them, but you're not trying to make them be like that. Sort of like, John, with what you were saying. You might go along with your buddy who's doing it, even though you're saying, I'd never do this myself. It can be used very effectively to show more than one point of view if you carefully separate it by chapter or section. Don't do it from paragraph to paragraph, and above all, don't do it in the same paragraph. People will do like separate chapters with a different point of view. Sometimes they'll do a section break and slip to a different point of view. Obviously, the trick with that is you have to signal very clearly who it is who's talking, like whose point of view are you in now. I've seen some people do that with first person, and I don't know how other people feel. I personally find that really irritating. It's like, if you've made me be this other person, don't make me suddenly be somebody else. I mean, I'm willing to change around, like go talk to somebody else, but not be somebody else. So you always have to, what?
Andy had a question. Was there an identity to the third person who tells the story of Harry Potter, or was it just Rowling telling the story? Was there a narrator in that story?
No. In third person limited, the narrator is invisible. Everything is told very tightly from the main character's point of view. It's just like third person. Or first person, it's like what they see, what they hear, but instead of saying, I saw this, I heard this, it would be, he saw this, he heard this. But you don't pull back where you're talking about what everybody sees and hears. Mm-hmm. Like you're very tight with that person, and you don't show anything that person wouldn't know. It's an easier form to write in than first person, and it's more intimate than third person omniscient. That's why people use it a lot. Does that answer it? Does that make sense?
No, I think so, yes.
Okay. The other thing about third person limited is it's a lot easier to show the action. And it tends to be more action driven than first person. Like there's a little less time spent on how people feel and a little more time spent on what they actually do, which can, be more interesting depending on the type of book you're writing. Okay, the disadvantages of it is, the reader only knows and sees what the viewpoint character knows and sees. There's more distance from the character, and so sometimes it's a bit harder to hold the reader's buy-in. It's sort of like when you're spending time with a friend. You can have a great time with them, and then all of a sudden it's like, I'm out of here. With first person, it's like you don't let them escape. And so you're holding them tight because they are that person, providing you're doing it well, which is difficult. With third person, they're with you, but they're not tied to you. And so you've got to keep the action moving. You've got to have the emotion moving. Pacing is really important in third person limited. And you've got to have more action. But you've still got to have the emotions and the personal viewpoint. So again, it's a balancing act, and that's where you spend a lot of time revising. I know when I'm writing, I'll write all this stuff, and I tend to write mostly in third person limited because it's an easier form. But I'll go back after 2 or 3 weeks to edit, and I'll be looking at it, and I'll be reading their reactions and what they thought and what they said. And I go into this who the hell care mode. I'll read it and it's like, why would anybody care about that? And I just flash it out. And that's where you kind of get into this difficulty with emotions and personal viewpoint. If you have a tendency to underwrite, then probably at that point you need to put them in. I have a tendency to overwrite, so I have to go back and take them out. And that's where revision's kind of important, because getting that tone exactly right is really hard. Okay, this is an example of from my book Dragons of Desert and Dust. I figured if I was talking about it, I should at least show you what I've done. And if you hate it, don't tell me. Just pretend it's awesome, okay? So this is one of the books I published a couple of years ago. Facing eastward toward the mountains, Angel Cerrillos dug his toes into the loose slats of the shed's roof. As the sun shimmered across the New Mexico desert, he lifted his arms upward, feeling the turquoise talisman warming against his chest like a piece of desert sky. The eagles are my brothers, he chanted. He swept his arms downward in the eagle's curving wing thrusts, imitating how they soared over the parched mountains. I am greater than the eagles. Eyes drifting shut, his mind flew skyward. So what I was trying to do in this was give a sense of the boy's character, that he's kind of desperately mystical, the location of where he is, and the potential problems he's facing. You get into the problems more in the next couple of paragraphs. But it's that thing of establishing character, which has to be done right up front in first person and third person limited. And also the setting also has to be done right up front, plus the tone and mood. So there's a lot of fine tuning that has to go into the beginning of any of these. Now the literary uses, third person limited is used extensively in modern literature. So a classic example is 1984. That's where you go along with the main character, and all the things that happen to him sort of happen to you, but you've got a little bit of distance because it's so horrifying. A contemporary book is The Orphan Train. A young adult is The Giver. That's such a good book if you've never read it. Middle grade book, The Doll Maker of Krakow. Science fiction, Cloud Atlas, and romance, Thanks for the Memories. So it's really common. Any genre you look at, you're pretty likely to find that, this form, because as I said, it's easier to write than the other ones, and you get more bang for your buck, so to speak. Third person omniscient. This is one that a lot of newer writers flirt with. They sort of slide in and out. So from Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Okay. The house was big, old, and Levin, though he lived alone, heated and occupied all of it. So we're watching him, we're not with him. He knew that it was even wrong and contrary to his new plans, but this house was a whole world for Levin. See, if this was third person limited, it would say, but this house was a whole world for him. It was the world in which his father and mother had lived and died. They had lived a life which for Levin seemed the ideal of all perfection, and which he dreamed of renewing with his wife and his family. So there's more of a sense of other people and what's happening. Okay, in third person omniscient, the story is told by an all-seeing narrator. It's usually, but not necessarily, the writer. I didn't check it exactly, but I would bet The Great Gatsby is third person omniscient, with the character of Nick telling the story. So he's kind of the all-seeing narrator in that, because he's telling you the story afterwards. So he already knows what's going to happen. So his attitude is tinging the tone because he knows what's going to happen. And so that's another thing you can do is, if it's omniscient, you know what's going to happen, and so you can play with the tone to move the reader along. So there's a lot of head hopping, and my clock is dinging. So there's a lot of head hopping. For example, little Florence did not know that Roger had decided to sell the Porsche. So you know what Florence knows, and then you know what Roger has done, but Florence doesn't know what Roger has done, and Roger probably doesn't know that Florence knew about it. So you can get this whole sort of like being Google Earth and looking down at all the houses. There's often scene and action hops where you get stuff like Meanwhile in a Tiny Cafe in Paris, and it tends to paint a wider landscape story or epic. Like there was a lot of third-person omniscient 100 years ago. That was the more common form. Sometimes it'd be first person. They tended to go from one to the other, but you very rarely got third person limited, and you never got second person. So the advantages of third person omniscient is you get this vast narrative that spans time and characters, and you're not limited to what one person knows. The narrator can adapt character viewpoints to literary ends. That means, like, particularly if the narrator is trying to tell something about society, they can give you one point of view, and then they can switch to another point of view, and that contrasts, and so the reader kind of goes, oh, I see what they're doing. And the characters can be more easily highlighted, like the good guy and the bad guy, like you know about this and you know about that. And the reader is up there with the narrator and knows more than any one character does. So you're sort of watching them play out the action. You're not with them, you're watching them play it out. So the disadvantages are the distance. The reader often doesn't buy into the realities of one character, so you've got a much less personal or visceral experience. My stupid dog is chewing up a coat hanger. The reader watches but does not participate in the action. And that's kind of a big deal for modern readers because they want to be there with you. It's like if you watch a TV show, typically like in any TV show, they're pretty much told in third person limited. You get the main character or the main characters are almost always center stage. And the secondary characters move in and out. You very rarely will have a scene with secondary characters finding stuff out. Sometimes you do, but not much. And you certainly wouldn't have a third level character do it. So you can sort of, if you're writing it, you kind of picture it like a TV show. And it is never third person omniscient because that's too jarring. The other disadvantage is you have to juggle a lot of viewpoints and action. They have to be kept balanced, or they have to be in there for a purpose. And one of the issues can be the details and knowledge of each character has to be tracked so that you don't make mistakes in narration. Like, you've got to make sure you've got all the details in. You've got to make sure each character is where they're supposed to be, and you know who knows what and when. So that can be a lot of detail work, which you may or may not enjoy. And the literary uses, Beloved by Toni Morrison is told that way. Bridgerton, if you guys have watched the Bridgerton story, it moves around from different characters. War and Peace by Tolstoy, The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett, and The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Okay, general rules. Whatever point of view you choose, you need to be consistent. It's jarring for the reader to hop around heads or to hop from one type of point of view to another. Like if you go from first person to third person omniscient, the reader's kind of going, what's going on here? Who is telling this story? Where is this story happening? And it's really important that to realize there's no right choice for point of view. It's a decision you make based on what kind of story you've got and what you want the reader to react to and how you want the reader to come along with you. It's really important not to switch this around in the story. It's something that you see people do. I think they tend to do it unconsciously, or they want more immediacy for one character and less for another, but that can be jarring for a reader too. And one of the things I've seen quite often is people have a tendency, say they always write in third person, and they decide to write a story in first person. So they're writing along, and it's like, I did this, and I did this, and I did whatever. And then about paragraph 4, they said, but she went here. And it's like, wait a minute. So if you've got a tendency to write always in one, and you're trying something else, make sure you go back and double check that you didn't drift between points of view. It's really common and really easy to do. And you just see it a lot. And particularly in self-published books where people are writing, but they haven't got the experience to realize what they're doing with it, and they're trying to have a certain effect, and it doesn't always work out well. I mean, if it's sort of like you've got to know all the rules before you can break them. But anyways, that's my opinion, my point of view. Other people might have different ones. There's a lot of little tricks. Like, for example, if you're writing in first point of view, one of the things you see all the time, which is a mistake, is somebody will say, I blushed. Well, that doesn't work because you can't see yourself blush. You can only tell what the person sees. So typically what you would have is, I felt my face heat up, or I knew that I was turning red, but not I blushed or I turned red, because you can't see that. You can only tell what you can see and hear. And that is a limiting factor, which it makes some people crazy, and other people it's like a puzzle that you get to solve. I like it. I like fiddling around with it. So, but that's what other people do. Okay, questions, confusions. What is your point of view about all this?
John has a point of view of wondering, how can point of view be used while writing a screenplay? Do you know anything in that manner?
Yes, screenplays are always third person, and they're typically third person limited, with the exception that it depends on what you're doing. I mean, if you're doing kind of an ensemble thing, you can move your point of view and it becomes more omniscient it's more you're switching third person limited, because it might go to a different set of characters and you watch them, which would be the comparable to having a chapter or a section from a different point of view in a book. You never get the third person omniscient, because what's the point of watching it if you already know what's going to happen? You want to bring the audience with you. So that's kind of a big deal.
I think there's some movies that use kind of the narrator. I know like Fight Club did that, where there was kind of this unreliable narrator there.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
I don't know Fight Club, but yes. You could play with it that way, but traditionally it would be like third person limited.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? Because, I mean, you can just go watch it and see how they do it.
I think Roland has a question. To add another factor, how about, for instance, first person present tense and first person past tense?
That is a choice, again, for the literary effect. If you do first person present, you're moving them in even closer to the experience you're having. Like, this is happening to me right now. You're walking with me, or you're with me, and this is the experience we're having. If you do past tense, again, it's a little easier to write and possibly less stressful for the reader, because if you're taking them somewhere they don't want to be, it depends on what you're doing. It's all your story, and you get to do what you want with it. Everything you do has got a different effect. So what you do is you consider what effect you want to have, and that's how you choose what you're doing. You can play with it. I mean, I play with lots of different kinds, especially when I do short stories, because short stories are a really good way to try out a style and see if it works. And if it doesn't, you haven't committed a whole novel, or you don't have to rewrite a whole novel, but you can try it out and see if doing it this way works for you. And anytime you move into a type of form or point of view that is less standard, you you have the advantage of having people kind of sit up and take notice or have a slightly different experience for people. So that's the advantage of it. Disadvantage is you're sometimes taking them into some place they don't want to go, or it's making them uncomfortable. Like if you've got somebody who always eats hamburgers and you're suddenly giving them a fish burger, they may or may not like it. And if they went in expecting a hamburger, you've got problems. But if you take them in saying, here's something new, give it a try, then you're okay. At least that's what I think.
Susan, what about third-person Omniscient, where you have internal monologue by characters? And I'm thinking like Dune was did this very aggressively, where they used italics to have internal monologue of various characters, and between one chapter and the next, not even chapter, but between one paragraph and the next, you're getting almost first-person, commentary on what's happening from different characters. Is there a way to? Is that under third-person Omniscient, or is that under some kind of weird blend?
I think it's kind of a weird blend. It's
Okay.
sort of like third-person limited, but then you're like moving around to different people, and it depends how much you move back and forth and how much the narrator is giving tone to the way it's described and the implication that this has already happened and they know what the outcome is. So that's one of the downsides with third-person Omniscient, is that the narrator knows what happened. And they're telling you a story is like, I remember when, as opposed to, and then this is happening right now. So it's got a little bit of both. And a lot of that, honestly, Matt, some of that is just really, really good storytelling.
Well, and I noticed that when Herbert used it, I just reread it, so that's why it's on the front of my mind.
10 years, so I'm
yeah,
kind of...
well, the new movie was supposed to come out, so I was trying to reread it before the movie came out. But when he did it, I noticed when I was reading it from an author's point of view, that he would keep everything within a paragraph. So if it would flip to almost like a point of view, third person limited of that character, whether it's like Paul or his mother or whatnot, and then within that paragraph would be the italics of the internal monologue, and then when he jumped to another paragraph, it may flip to another character's point of view. And he did it very obviously, it's a masterpiece in the way he did it, but he really made sure that you knew, I'm now sitting over the shoulder of this character, I'm now sitting over the shoulder of this character, telling a general third person story. It was very difficult on how he did that.
Yeah, a lot of people, they make a mistake of not clearly delineating whose point of view they're in when they're switching around. And that's really tough. But with someone like that who's so good, you follow and you get used to the rhythm. And I haven't looked at it for a long time, but I bet you anything, if you broke it down by the pacing, like how things happened, I bet there was like a steady progression or a steady pattern, not just sort of leaping all over the place. I would guess. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Is that true?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I was getting another book off my shelf.
Oh. I would bet with him doing that, it would be like consistent moving among main characters, so it's not jarring. It's not like you have 48 pages of Paul and a tiny paragraph of a third level character.
Yes, it was happening, I think, like in that opening paragraph when he was doing, the opening chapter he did, it was the test with Paul was with his mom, and it was the Quizact Hatteract test, and there were three characters in the room, and he was hopping between those three brains. And so immediately, I think right off the bat, that he'll be hopping between people's brains right up front, and then he carried that through.
Right, but the janitor in the hallway was really annoyed by the sounds.
It was only, he only did it of main characters, like the main chess piece characters, not some of the minor characters. And then I'm also thinking about Vonnegut in Slaughterhouse-Five, where I believe it was first person, but between paragraph to paragraph, his character was actually moving through time.
Right.
and shifting locations. Like he would be a million years in the future on some planet and then come back to like present day, and then he'd be in the war, and then he was doing the time shifting thing. And that's another example, I think, of really knowing being able to communicate to your reader that this is the character I'm talking about and I'm in this place. And those are two books I think that they twisted a lot of the stuff you talked about here. And I think they did it. If somebody's looking for an example of those type of things, those
really
are good ones.
Good ones.
Yes, really good ones. And they just happen to be good books. So maybe that's the good thing about it.
Yeah, that's I know that one with like Slaughterhouse-Five, like the fact I don't think you could tell that one in third person because otherwise the experiences would be lost, because like the whole thing with the book is what is happening here, and he's going back and forth, but you're going with him.
Yeah, so, exactly. You know. Does anybody have any additional questions for Susan? A lot of internal dialogue. I tend to use the kind of the third person omniscient with a lot of the internal monologue of my main characters. I like that style. Mm-hmm. So that's something I tend to gravitate to. Let's see if there's any other questions.
I hope this is clear.
Diana had a good one. How about fourth wall breaking? Any comments on that? Breaking the fourth wall with the reader? I think this was done in a cinema. I think it was done really well with what's the show on Netflix with Kevin Spacey?
Oh yeah.
House of Cards. I think this was in movie form. It was done really well there. So
yeah, there's a lot of some of the TV shows. I think it started in the 80s. They did quite a bit of it. The actor had to be good enough to pull it off, where they suddenly turn to you and start talking to the audience. In literature, you see it where it's like gentle reader and dear this and dear that, where all of a sudden the narrator is addressing the reader. And sometimes, like the one I was thinking of off the top of my head is the books by Elizabeth Peters. They're archaeological. They're fun. They're funny. They're very tongue-in-cheek. And the main character, it's told first person, but the character addresses the reader. So, I mean, you can do it. You can certainly do it. And you can do it in different forms. I don't know if you can do it in third person limited. You could definitely do it in Omniscient, and you can do it in first person. I don't know if you can do it in the others. Not because you can't, just because I have no familiarity with it. Might be fun to try. You know, you never, but yeah, it's like everything else. Like you're going for an effect. Is there a reason why you're doing it? You don't do anything just 'cause. It's like if it's going to pull the reader in, or if it's tongue in cheek, or if it adds a different dimension to it, then definitely. But that's again, like I say, I'll mess around with things in short stories to see if they work, because I don't want to commit a whole book to some kind of weird literary thing. But the ones that work beautifully. That's the best I've got on that one. So I don't know.
No, I think that's perfect. What do you prefer to write in?
Me?
Yes.
Mostly third person limited, because it's easier.
Okay.
I have 2 or 3 books in first person, and they're harder because you get caught in the character, and if you've got a character with problems, sometimes they're a pain in the backside. So you have to keep them positive when you're already irritated with them. So not having that distance can be difficult for me. Some people do it really well. I don't.
Yeah, I tried writing a little first person, and I struggle with it as well. Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, we can break and everybody can have their afternoon back.
Yeah, there's here's some.
Oh, great.
Some reference guides. The Reedsy one's pretty good. It's got a graphic. It's a little bit simple. But if you're finding it confusing, it's a really good description. Grammarly has a blog that's not bad, and Masterclass blog is exceptionally good, because what they did was they put together the information from quite a few writers, like I can't remember which writers, but some big name writers, and they put that together. So that's pretty interesting what they have to say about it. And there's lots more online if you want to look for it. But these were the best ones I saw. And I think that's...
No, I greatly appreciate all the book recommendations that you listed there. I think people can find their genre and find a good book that shows the style.
Yeah, I hope so.
Thank you so much, Susan, for putting the time together here and giving this talk. It was really helpful.
You're welcome.
Oh, thank you. All right, everybody's giving you nice love in the chat.
Linda said we were to remind you that the next meeting is a social meeting, so come ready to talk and read, and it'll be fun. And I've forgotten what else she said we were supposed to say.
There's also there's a pop-up event at Everett. Is there any update on that? I don't think so. Andy had that question. I know we've gotten a number of requests, Andy, for attending it, and we have a list of those names, and I think you're one of them. And I think we'll make sure to take a note and send out an update on that soon.
Yeah, we're meeting tomorrow to talk more about what we're doing, and so we'll have a better sense of how our events are going and what we're planning to do.
We have a meeting tomorrow?
Steering committee.
Ah, yes, okay.
I mean, really, Matthew, if you don't come, you'll end up getting stuck with everything, unlike now where you're doing everything.
I'll try. 1:30. Thank you, Tony.